Hey, everybody. It's Christmas Eve. So wherever you are, Merry Christmas. Didn't plan on doing this live stream, but we've come into some information that sort of mandates that we clear a few things up based on all of the conspiracy theories and other things going on around this particular incident. I'm very pleased that joining me for this live stream is our good friend, retired Navy Captain Kevin Miller, call sign Hozer. You guys know him well. Hornet pilot, and as well documented on the channel, he and I served together in the early 90s when I was in my second fighter squadron, VF-143, the Puking Dogs, and he was the Airwing landing signal officer for carrier Airwing 7. So Hozer, thanks for taking some time off on this holiday to join us for clearing some of these issues up.
Hi, Mooch. Great to be with you again, and Merry Christmas.
So let's go through some of the background here, and then we'll go ahead and pick up with some of the comments in the chat. So remind everybody that Hozer and I went out to Truman last April, and spent a couple of days aboard CVN 75 and had a great time. Carrier Airwing 1 was aboard, and it was their first day of cyclic ops when we were out there. We got to watch both day and night flight ops from close range. I have some B-roll here. And this is me right on the foul line. In fact, Hozer was back on the platform. You guys remember that Hozer got to wave an airplane, which we've showed a couple of times on the channel. But this is a VF-140 or VFA-143 tanker configured airplane coming aboard. So that'll become important in the story as we go along here. So we got to spend some time out there. Very capable Airwing, very capable ship. So they went on cruise on September 23rd, actually right after we were at Oceana. Hozer and I were at Oceana for the air show there, and they left that following Monday after the air show and went on deployment. They went to the Red Sea for a while. They went to the North Sea for a while because that kind of surprised everybody. Everybody thought they would sortie right to the Fifth Fleet AOR, CENTCOM AOR, but they went north and did some bilateral exercises and some show the flag stuff up there in the North Sea, and then came and in-chopped the Med, and on December 15th, in-chopped the CENTCOM, Central Command / Fifth Fleet Area of Responsibility, AOR. So they hadn't been on the scene for very long, like 7 days, when this event happened. So I wake up on Sunday morning. This past Sunday morning, I was actually at my son's house in South Jersey. I was getting some quality granddaughter time. And it's 5 a.m. and I was sort of going through the usual, like check some comments out, see what else is going on. And my good friend Sam Legrone, who's the editor-in-chief of USNI News, sent me the post he had just done the evening prior, a few hours before, about this blue on blue, this friendly fire shootdown. So here's the CENTCOM statement that covers the high points, which is 2 U.S. Navy pilots ejected safely over the Red Sea during the early morning hours of December 22nd, when their F-18 fighter aircraft was shot down in an apparent case of friendly fire. The guided missile cruiser USS Gettysburg, CG-64, which is part of the USS Harry S Truman carrier strike group, mistakenly fired on and hit the F-18, which was flying off the Harry S Truman. Both pilots were safely recovered. Initial assessments indicate one of the crew members sustained minor injuries. The incident was not the result of hostile fire, and a full investigation is underway. So review some of the high points that I captured in my quickie episode. VFA-11 is the Red Rippers F-18F model, which has a pilot and a weapons systems officer in the rear cockpit. Rios are no more, to my sadness, but a lot of mainstream media has been saying 2 pilots ejected. That's technically incorrect. And the Gettysburg is a Ticonderoga class cruiser, super capable. This particular ship had just been through a major modification in the shipyards that gave it all kinds of new capabilities. So we'll talk about some of that very basically. And so I did this episode a minute long. The reason I'm talking in hushed tones is because I didn't want to wake my granddaughter up and get the wrath of everybody else in the house. So since that time, we've been made aware of some other factors, including the fact that as this friendly fire incident happened, there was great, let's just call it entropy around the carrier strike group. So it was not necessarily coincident with, but happening in sequence with a strike against targets in Yemen. So this is the statement by CENTCOM around those strikes, which is U.S. military had conducted airstrikes targeting Yemen's Houthi rebels at the time of the friendly fire incident. Those strikes were in the area of Sana'a, the capital, and the port of Hodeidah, and hit a, quote, missile storage facility, end quote, and a, quote, command and control facility, end quote. Houthi sources verified the attack and also claimed that they had launched 8 drones and 17 cruise missiles in response. Central Command said that the warships and the aircraft had earlier shot down multiple Houthi drones and anti-ship cruise missile launched by the rebels. They also claimed, the Houthis claimed, that they had shot down the Super Hornet without offering any evidence that that was in fact true. So that's kind of their usual stuff. So all that sets the scene, Hozer, for the specifics of how this shoot down happened. So the other knowns that I will talk about, these, let's just call these the givens up front, and then we'll fully allow that what we're going to surmise around is not official word, credible word, but not official word. But the other thing that Sam Legrone at US9 News was able to get from official sources in the Pentagon yesterday was 2 things that are important. First, that the Gettysburg, and this isn't the Gettysburg, this is a file photo, shot SM-2 missiles at the Super Hornet. And they shot 2 of them. This is verified information. So we'll talk about that sequence going forward here. So there you go. That's all the knowns. So Hozer, let's talk about what is the unofficial word around what happened next.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here, Mooch. This is what we've learned is the wee hours of the morning. There is a strike going on somewhere. Not sure how it's coordinated, of course, but there's active combat going on. All during this time, you've got to launch and recover airplanes, as carriers have done for decades and decades. Going back to World War II in these types of situations. Let's talk about the ship is in the Red Sea, the CENTCOM AOR, and it's been there for a short period of time. The Red Sea, roughly 1,000 miles long, but at its widest there, it's very narrow. Of course, at its widest, Mooch, 1 to 200 miles max. I mean, it's tight airspace.
Yeah, it's a small body of water for sure.
Sure. You've got a threat that is threatening you, and you got to deal with that. So again, at night, wee hours of the morning, and there's at the nadir of human circadian rhythms. It's a thing, and now we deal with it. Carriers, strike groups that are already on arrival. We have trained and manned equipped, and so here we are ready to go. And so this is a situation where the Harry S Truman strike group, gets to a theater and is right into it. I mean, it's from day one, it seems that they are employing as they've been directed. So there's got to be there's. So let's talk about the ship and the cruiser. So the ship is launching airplanes. Certainly, there's helicopters all over the place. From various ships. All the ships are equipped with them, and there's a threat coming at you. There's layered defenses. There's the and again, not sure if there's combat air patrol or maybe a ship has responsibility for a threat vector, but responsibilities have been laid out. And there's the outer thread, and then it gets closer and gets closer still, and people have responsibilities for that. But again, all during this, the ship has got to launch and recover airplanes. So that is the scene here. There's a lot going on.
So the guys who were shot and shot at are in VFA-11. And so we know this is the unofficial word. And this is where the details of how did this happen sort of come into view. As you said, we're talking, this is night ops. They've sequenced the strike package back in. The Alpha Whiskey and the other missile shooters, I'm not sure exactly what the complement is currently in the Red Sea in terms of Arleigh Burke class destroyers that are with Gettysburg, but certainly we've documented their capabilities since Ike Strike Group, actually since Carney in-shopped and within hours shot down that first cruise missile headed for Israel out of Yemen. So we have documented just how capable the Arleigh Burke class destroyers have been in theater. So basically their responsibility, as you've outlined, during the return to force of a strike package is what we call delouse, right? So, separate pepper from fly shit, as we said, chaff from wheat. And there are different ways that we can do that. And we'll talk about IFF and encrypted modes and so forth and so on, as well as the Aegis class radar and weapon system settings. But what we're surmising, or what are based on the information that we've gotten, what we're thinking is the case here, again, unofficial word, is the strike package has recovered. Now, meanwhile, one of the principals in the missile shots launched on a DCA mission, ran out of gas, trapped, fueled again on the flight deck, and launched again. So it's almost like there's some flex deck. I mean, this is pretty. It's not just cyclic ops, Hozer, or not even just a strike package launching. It's a strike package launching and some flex deck happening with mission tankers, recovery tankers in between. So what we're trying to emphasize here is the highest amount of, let's just call it entropy, going on with the Airwing, and we would assume with the other members of the strike group, the small boys, including Gettysburg. So as we documented up front, the Houthis verified they shot a lot of stuff. CENTCOM verified that a lot of stuff came at them. What we also know from our informal sources is missiles and drones were shot down by CAG-1 aircraft before this blue on blue. So that kind of lives in the shadow now of the blue on blue. What would have been the highlight of the evening is now an asterisk because of this blue on blue. So let me bring up a poor man's graphic. So talk us through what we're seeing here, Hozer.
Yes. So here is here's the ship now, which is launching and recovering airplanes. So in this situation, it's recovering airplanes. And these airplanes could have been marshaled, as we say, after the ship at some range. The first one, we have a hold at 21 miles, 6,000 feet, and then it kind of stacks up from there. But sometimes it can be right overhead the ship. And in these tight closets of airspace, that's another a viable manner. Another scenario is when you come back and there's a lot going on, as we said, you can just be picked up by the ship and vectored and handed off to Marshall, and they'll vector you after the ship. So, okay. The goal is to be 10 miles after the ship at 1,200 feet. You're at 250 knots of airspeed. Now you're sequenced in, and in this graphic, one airplane behind the other. Typically, a couple miles of spacing as we bring our airplanes home. So you're not sure how they got there, but now they're spaced. So here's a cruiser, which is after the ship, a very typical place for a cruiser or a guided missile destroyer to be. It can be placed there as a plane guard. It can be placed there to help the LSOs on a black night discern the horizon. So again, all standard. Here's so Ripper 1, Ripper 2, and Dog 1 in this scenario. These guys are coming back from their tasks, and me as an LSO, I'm looking back and I can see this conga line of airplanes that's coming back to the ship. At 10 miles typically is when the first guy will dirty up at about that range, slowing from 250 to 150 knots, and then getting close to the ship to final on speed. So not sure how all these guys got lined up like this, but it is rock bottom routine of naval aviation, and again in the middle of this very, very dynamic evolution.
So we'll remind folks who may not be familiar with the CV NATOPS. So at night it's called Case 3, as you went through some of the specifics. So if you think of your local airport, how you can look out, you can see airplanes coming in straight, sequenced. That's sort of what it's like at night. You remember during the daytime, Case 1, we come into the break. So airplanes fly next to the ship and then turn abruptly, fly downwind and do a tight pattern around visual range of the ship, which allows you to recover expeditiously. So at night, you don't do that. Like Hozer said, what we are surmising based on the information, the unofficial information, and oh, by the way, these ranges, this is not an official slide. This is something I put together based on what we've heard informally and unofficially. But those are not the call signs, the official tactical call signs of the airplanes, but they're lined up straight. What we do know from the informal channels is these airplanes are no longer up the mission frequency. They have switched to Marshall. And so Marshall is the control agency that starts you on your way back to the ship. And as Hozer said, at about 10 miles or so, they will switch you up approach. So you're up, I'm assuming their comm plan is like standard, Hozer. So Marshall's button 16, they'll switch you up button 15 or 14 for final approach. And that's where you're talking to the final controller, and he'll ask you how your needles look and so forth and so on. And these days they're using precision landing mode. And so they're engaging rate and path. And as you said, Hozer, they're going at 10 miles, if no later than 8 miles, you want to be on speed and dirty. So the dimensions here are the ones we understand were at the time of the first weapon coming off Gettysburg. So Ripper 1 was basically 5 miles aft of Gettysburg, which is 10 miles aft of Truman. Okay, so we believe at the range, so that's 15 miles away from Truman, so they're probably not dirty, right? Would you concur with that?
I agree. I think you're not going to go any dirtier than, they'll call you dirty, but by 8 miles, you need to have your gear down, but typically 10, typically.
So 10 miles. So they're flying at 250 knots, 1,200 feet. But the other key point here is they're no longer in mission mode. So I know the Tomcat specifics with respect to defensing. What are they for the Super Hornet, Hozer?
Sure, they're gonna turn off their radars in standby. They're gonna turn off their radar warning gear, their expendables. So turn all that off. Their goggles are off. The goggles have been stowed since they were in Marshall. So we don't land with night vision goggles on. It would for a couple of reasons. So yes, they are now focused their entire being on final here about landing on the ship in a couple of minutes. So they're just refining the trim on the airplane and setting up for that.
So note the airspeed. Also, the fact that Hozer points out goggles off is crucial here, because you can imagine if they'd had their goggles on when these missiles start going on, those things would have shut down big time. They wouldn't have been able to see anything. So some of the narrative at this point is from the point of view of Ripper 2. So he's 5 miles behind Ripper 1. We don't know exactly how they were configured, but we're guessing based on some of the rumint that they were both configured as tankers, which would make sense. And maybe even Dog 1 is a tanker as well, either mission or recovery tanker. Again, a strike package, you need a lot of gas in the air. These airplanes would recover last after everybody else gets aboard, as we saw when we were aboard Truman back in April. In fact, if you watch that video, the last airplane aboard is a Dog tanker, and as soon as Hozer waves and as he's relating the grade to the rider, the LSO rider, you hear the air boss say, "Recovery complete." So, last tanker aboard, recovery complete. So same drill here, we're surmising. So Ripper 2 at some point sees a missile come off of Gettysburg. I was going to say Ticonderoga. Ticonderoga class ship Gettysburg. And so his first thought is, they're shooting at drones. And then he sees that start to track, like do a real abrupt hayaka towards Ripper 1. So this is a very short range shot for a SM-2, a standard missile. And so at that point, the next thing that Ripper 2 sees and hears is, first he hears ELTs going off, which is crucial, right, Hozer?
Yes.
And that means that the ejection seats have fired. And ELT is emergency something transmitter.
Emergency locator transmitter, yes.
Yeah, and so that when you pull the ejection handle, you're going to hear those things on guard. So they hear that, and then 3 seconds later, they see a gigantic fireball in front of them. So Ripper 1 has been hit, presumably by the missile shot off of Gettysburg. Okay, so that sequence is important. And we don't know the details. This is what the investigation will reveal, but it appears that the crew, pilot and Wizzo, preemptively ejected when they realized the weapon was coming at them, which saved their lives. So a standard missile is a centroid weapon with a huge warhead. It's not a friendly missile like a Sidewinder that goes after the heat source, and you can probably survive impact. Had they not ejected beforehand, they most certainly wouldn't have survived that explosion. So that's,
I agree. And the presence of mind, these guys, I mean, they see this giant sun in front of them, coming, whoa, and then they're obviously watching it. And now it's coming, it's coming back, and we can only imagine that the coordination in that cockpit.
It's nightmare fuel, right?
Absolutely.
It's nightmare fuel. So no raw gear, like we said, they've defensed, so they're not getting a raw spike. They're just visual. And again, good thing they had their goggles off because they can visually see it. And it's like the space shuttle. They describe it as, it's almost like daylight. There's so much, orange glow from this plume coming at them. Okay, so then it gets even hairier. And this is the information that has not been, certainly not been briefed by any official sources. So Ripper 2, I'll go back to my poor man's graphic here. So Fireball, ELTs going off. Second weapon comes off of Gettysburg. And Ripper 2 realizes it's tracking towards them. So again, as you've said, Hozer, they're not at tactical, like corner speed, 350, 400 knots, where they could put on 7, 8 Gs and fence with this weapon. So the pilot dumps the nose, beams the missile, which is just put the plume on your wing line, but he's at 1,200 feet. There's not a whole lot of room to play with here. This is hairy stuff.
You bet. And he's again at a 250 is typically that's what you're flying out of Marshall as you're being controlled on final bearing, and that's not a lot of smack on the airplane. So you're just, and again, all your tactical stuff is turned off. You're down low on that black water on a black night. Just wow.
So also, as we said, defense, no expendables. So the Ripper 2 pilot goes for it, muscle memory, and realizes nothing's going to come out because I've turned all that stuff off because I'm on my final approach here. I'm not in tactical mode anymore, right? So they actually, and the specific ICS intercockpit comms, we don't know, but it looks like the pilot was saying to the Wizzo, we've got to go. You never use the word eject, but kind of like what they did, we need to do at this point, but they didn't. By the anecdotal information we've received, the missile missed them by 100 feet. They felt it thump them as it went by, and it hit the water and exploded right under them. So that, my heart's racing just saying that. That's intense.
Mooch, you and I write military action adventure novels. We could never get away with writing this scenario. We would just be, that'll never happen. Impossible.
No, our editors would spike it. They'd be like,
exactly.
This is ridiculous.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
but again, this does happen, and it happens in military history. These amazing stories, they absolutely do happen, and certainly that they're plausible.
Let's go ahead.
I mean, we were talking earlier. Maybe we'll get back to this. The return to force. I mean, back in the olden days, World War II. And even today, I mean, it's okay. We're going to have a designated altitude. We're going to have at this, we're going to maybe do some maneuvers, which is also going to augment. Back in the day, that's all they had. But today we have electronic means, and now we're talking the various modes of IFF, and there's this RF energy all over the place as everyone is tracking, friendlies and in this case, enemy, and they're intermixed. There's a lot going on.
So we'll talk specifics about IFF in a second here, what we remember from our day about what you had to have working before you could launch. But the other thing that is anecdotal involves the LSO. So let's double click on that comm chain between the guy on the platform looking aft and what he did, and then what Captain Snowden did after that.
Sure. So the LSO has a handset, a UHF handset, and it is typically set on the approach frequencies. Also, there's a sound powered phone so you can talk to the boss, and then a good old fashioned dialing phone that you can dial the boss, dial the captain. So you're looking aft, and then on the horizon you see this plume. Whoa, and then it the missile's you're gonna follow the flight path as the motor's burning out. I believe that who else is looking aft? Probably just the LSO that has a radio or a means of communication. So certainly the LSO can get right on the radio. He's got it in his hand, and make a transmission to get everyone's attention. I think that dialing the phone to the bridge, that would take a lot longer. But there's a sound powered phone. You got a phone talker next to you. Hey, call the bridge. Tell them this has happened. Mooch, I remember a time when on our workups, if you might remember this, it was a dusk recovery, and the ship had a radio casualty, and so I get a call on the platform. I say, look, your radio is the only one that's working right now, so you got to contact the guys in Marshall. So I was able to dial up Marshall.
I do remember that.
We've had a casualty here, and there was enough ambient light. I said, just come back to the ship, and we'll work you VFR pattern, and then in the middle of that evolution, the ship got their radios back and did the best to untangle that and get everyone aboard in the light that we had. So things like that do happen. But again, the LSO in this situation has got a radio in his hand, looking aft where all this is happening, and can sound the alarm.
So Paddles sees the explosion. As you say, there's no mystery because it's very clear with Gettysburg 10 miles after the ship firing this weapon. They see the entire missile time of flight, and then the resultant explosion. They can hear the ELTs because they have guard frequency, on their radios there on the platform. So he calls whatever means, and you've described all the various options, but he gets a hold of Captain Snowden, who we got to meet and talk to. If you haven't seen this episode, you can hear Captain Snowden describe where they were in workups, what it's like to be captain of a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. We also talk about the fact that he was also the executive officer of Truman and what the difference between being XO and CO is. So anyway, Paddles calls Captain Snowden, the CO of Truman, and Captain Snowden gets on whatever frequency or whatever bridge to bridge with Gettysburg and the other small boys and basically says, cease fire. So that brings us to the end game of the second missile. So it missed Ripper 2, not by much. So we don't know as we're sitting here whether Ripper 2's evasive maneuvers were effective. Obviously no expendables. An SM-2 is a lethal missile coming off a Tycho class cruiser. So the other option is that call went out in time for the Gettysburg missile team to do what we call cut the missile, which is stop the information going to it to provide guidance. So that's another thing that might have happened there in the end game. The official report will say exactly what happened, but that's one of the things that may happen. So while we're chatting about that, Hozer, let's talk real quick about the Aegis system and a Ticonderoga class cruiser. So if you think back to the Vincennes shoot down of an Iranian airliner back in, was that 1988, I think?
Yes.
That's a good example of perception equals reality. That was a fairly new system. They hadn't been on station. There had been some activity. They actually hooked an F4 at an airfield, and that was the data that they thought as they were looking at the flight path of the 747 that was flying, feet wet out of Iran. And so they talked themselves into the fact that they were under attack. So the scariest... Go ahead.
And that incident took place at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Yes.
Yeah, that was in the was that North Arabian Sea or Persian Gulf?
I would say in the Persian Gulf.
Okay.
At the bottom of it, yes.
Yeah. So, not much decision-making time, high PRF sort of, matrix, and they actually had too much information. They confused the data that they were looking at. All right. So we don't know, huge caveat, we don't know what the rules of engagement are in theater. Hozer mentioned return to force profiles. There are variables like airspeed and altitude. We'll talk IFF specifics here in a second, but then an Aegis class warship, destroyer or cruiser, has an auto acquisition mode that is basically RoboCop, where you can set all the parameters, and if you can actually do full acquisition auto, which is it'll actually fire weapons without any human interface. We doubt that that's the way this was set up, but it could be semi-auto, which is you punch in the parameters that are go, go, go. And then if they don't meet those parameters, now you start working your way to hot trigger logic. Okay, so that is now a segue into an IFF discussion. So Hozer, back in the day, I remember, and we call it mode 4. It's not mode 4 anymore. It's mode something else, 25 years on. And this was only when you're in hostile waters, right? You didn't use this above and beyond IFF in just normal CONUS operating. So you'd be on the flight deck, and this guy would walk up to you with this specialized antenna, and he'd shine it on your IFF blade. And if he gave you a thumbs up, you're good to go. That was called a sniff check. Here comes the sniff check, right? He gave you a thumbs up, launch. Thumbs down, you're like, uh-oh, where's my integrated weapons team? Guys, come on over here, punch it. I'd go give him one of these, punch IFF. And they'd take their key thing that was keyed with a specific code for that day. Another thing we'll talk about, which you cover in your latest novel, kind of a gotcha, but punch it, boom. Okay, now sniffer guy comes back. All right, go flying, right? If still thumbs down, guess what? Your sideline launched the spare. You're not going flying without a good IFF. Okay, so because a lot of people in chat on myriad social media things have said, what about IFF? IFF's a thing. How come they didn't IFF? Okay, that's what we're talking about. There are mitigators, including another bit of anecdotal information that we received from somebody who's late of the Airwing, which is the IFF mode X has been dumping on cat shots, which is very Tomcat-esque. We used to dump all kinds of things during cat shots, and so that sounds like a kind of a fleet type of a thing where, okay, you sniffer check good, cat shot, boom, and now, okay, hey, Ripper X, I'm not reading your IFF, what's going on? And you'd have to remain within the, probably a 10-mile circle. You couldn't go out and come back, or immediate recovery, or whatever the circumstance was. You couldn't get in the mix without a good IFF.
Exactly.
So
and this is another mode of, or another, I guess, safeguard. You're good on deck and you launch, and now you've launched, and a cannon plug can come loose, and stuff happens. So the machine is, that 4G strain just kind of broke there. So you get airborne, and you're going to get checked again by our good buddies in the E2 squadron, and it might be, no, we don't see you, so you're not going. You're just gonna stay in circle, tight circles around the ship for that event.
So before we get to the chat, Hozer, let's just say that we are so lucky, and it's Christmas season, so this is seriously spiritual intervention that saved the crew that ejected and made that second missile miss. We would be talking about, in fact, we probably wouldn't be doing this live stream if we'd lost life. We wouldn't be comfortable talking about these things other than official channel statements. But it sounds cliche and tried to say we dodged a bullet. We dodged a missile for sure, and we dodged a bullet in terms of the first crew getting out safely. I know that the Wizzo was hurt and needed some stitches when he got back to the ship. I also know that he was able to call his mom and assure her that he was okay. So in terms of outcomes, we are so lucky that what happened in the face of this huge screw up.
It took that airplane was built in St. Louis, Missouri. It probably took them a couple of years to build it, frankly. And it cost tens of millions of dollars. It took decades to build the two human beings that were in that airplane. And is so, you and I in our careers, if there's a doubt, there is no doubt. Get out, and we'll talk about it later. But just save yourself, and that's going to be a good day.
It is a good day. And again, I'm thinking, as I said earlier, nightmare fuel, that ejection decision matrix. As a Rio, it's always like, if you're seeing a red ball that disappears off the bottom, do you preemptively eject instead of riding it out and having the Tomcat split in two on the round down? What happens if you make the wrong call and the airplane traps? In this case, right. What if the missile misses your airplane and you eject out of a perfectly good Super Hornet? I concur with you that better to make the call and then, whatever, like we have shown that plat tape of the Tomcat going over the side after it's blown over the side behind Cat 4. I think it was on Enterprise, but they punch out, right? And the airplane gets hung up in the catwalk. And people are like, well, why do they punch out? It's like, because the airplane just as easily could have broken through the catwalk and wound up in the water, and both guys would have died. So that was the right call.
We briefed that, didn't we? I mean, it's okay if the nose wheel is going over the edge, get
punch.
Out. I don't think it never occurred to me to brief. Okay, you're on final, and here comes a missile. This. That in that scenario. Wow.
So details to follow, but Hozer and Mooch pass massive BZ to that crew for ejecting when they did. So let's look at some of the comments here. We have a lot of them. See if we see anything that we like.
Was this another USS Liberty incident? No. This stuff happens. This is fratricide, blue on blue. It is a part of warfare and has been for thousands of years. And a thorough investigation will be conducted, and measures will be taken. The Navy. In recent decades, certainly, if you're launching, all these, again, since the Korean War, we've gone over the beach and for decades, and day after day after day, and it's never reported. But then an incident happens, and maybe a blue on blue or a bomb goes where it shouldn't, and that gets highlighted. So 99.999% of the time, you never hear about it. But these things this is a human endeavor, and they happen. So there'll be an investigation. It'll be very thorough. And you know what, Mooch? We may not know. I mean, there's going to be a classification level to this. We won't know, but I think that all of us can rest assured that it will be investigated.
So this is a sort of conspiracy theory that we're trying to dismiss here. I'm just going to say that being shot down by a Houthi is less embarrassing than being shot down by one of your own warships. So this is not the Navy not willing to admit that they got shot down by the Houthis. Trust me on this one. So if you're saying that at this point, then you're just delving in conspiracy theories, and that's on you. And again, the IFF piece is something that we will find out. The comments are whacked. It looks like they are. We're trying to find some good ones among the typical, crazy ones. So please stick with us here.
It's another thing, unless you found one, but another thing that's in play here. Again, this is the wee hours of the morning, and there's this thing called Zulu time that you and I had to deal with our whole careers. Even filing a flight plan to Kelly Air Force Base in Texas. You had to take off and land time, and so Zulu time, and the authentication or the keying of our electronic means, that had to be taken into account, and it is, and it was taken into account by these guys too. But that just throws another variable in, and again, we don't know if that was involved here, but it's a thing that.
Well, you cover this in your latest novel, that very fact of, crypto gear rolls over at midnight Zulu time, and so you get punched with the appropriate code for the day, and then you go fly, and then it rolls over to the next day. And now are all parties savvy that you might have yesterday's code, or you could have tomorrow's code, or it's everybody rolls to tomorrow, and therefore if you're not the current code, then I interrogate you as hostile or not friendly, let's say. That's a gotcha. We don't know if that's the case, but that's the timing works because Red Sea is +2 Zulu, so that would have been about the time that this mission happened, where they rolled between days. I'd had that happen during an exercise, and so that's kind of a gotcha,
And
so, but we don't know.
This is a human variable, and here it is, my latest high end that I talk about in the novel, and some I'm sure there's some of the readers here that have picked up on that. It's a thing, and you gotta this goes back, for the want of a nail, the battle was lost, and Clausewitz says, in warfare everything is simple, but even the simplest things are difficult or can be difficult.
And if you're in semi-auto AC and you're like, okay, airspeed, altitude, although again, I don't think you'd plug in 250 knots and 1,200 feet. That's the other thing. If you're thinking, okay, we don't want to shoot down our own tactical jets, which will be flying at 350 knots and will be up at 10,000 feet or greater, drones are going to be down low and slower. So now, is this a gotcha on a case 3 approach at 250 knots and 1,200 feet? Again, these are the things that the investigation will reveal. But that's kind of a matrix. When we found out, oh, by the way, these guys were up Marshall frequency on final approach, not RTB, just getting feet wet after being part of the strike package. So that's another bit of the Venn diagram crosses over a little bit there. Then you do the timepiece in terms of Zulu versus local time and next day kind of stuff. The other thing that Rub the Rock points out here in his comment, which Hozer, I think this is probably the case. So you think about the centerline camera looking aft, you probably would see the missile going up and the explosion. So that plat tape is certainly probably very revealing.
There might be some. There might be some from that centerline camera or maybe other cameras. So that'll all be investigated.
This is like coming to a YouTube episode near you in a year or so, right? Unless we get like a Vinson type leak by the PAO shop or something, don't expect to see that plat footage anytime soon. Another bit of intel, this is official word, is Gettysburg has been relieved as the air warfare commander within the strike group. So that means it would roll to one of the Arleigh Burke class destroyers. So that's obviously a dubious circumstance for the crew of Gettysburg in terms of punishments and relieving the CO and all that other stuff. That will happen in due time, and it may be sooner rather than later. And we'll report on that as it comes to pass. This isn't a good circumstance for the CO in any case. I would bet that he will be relieved, but that's just Mooch talking. At first, Hozer, when we'd heard 3 a.m., we thought, oh, okay, that was probably an alert package that launched. And so there's some doubt at that point is, okay, so is the CO in CIC aboard Gettysburg, or is he, in his in-port cabin catching a little rack time as his watch team, headed by a commander. He's an 06, 05 is, very capable guy that he trusts, and he has his standing orders. But the fact that this was coincident with a strike, we're almost guaranteed that the CO of Gettysburg was in CIC with his battle team, with his watch team. It was, their first stringers working this delousing part. So I don't think it was, the fact that it wasn't the CO's oversight that may have created this. But these are details that, again, all we've done is framed the Aegis class capabilities in very general terms. We know for a fact that 2 SM-2s were fired. We know for a fact, based on CENTCOM statements, that one of them hit what we're calling Ripper 1. We think that airplane was configured as a tanker. Another outlet reported, based on statements from the Air-Land PAO, that the tanker was hit while it was conducting tanking ops. That is not true. That's where you got to watch glomming onto bad gouge, as we say. And so that's why Hozer and I have been very clear about official word versus word that we've heard via unofficial channels that we believe is credible. So let's see if we got any other comments. We've been live for 51 minutes, huge crowd. We thank everybody for joining us on New Year's Eve. Again, thank you for your support over the years, and particularly this year. We'll be doing a year in review live stream on the 31st, but thanks for joining us, and Merry Christmas, everybody. Go ahead, Hozer.
Yeah, I just saw a comment. Okay, it's after the aircrew ejects, then what happens? And so whoa, all of us, you're in your warm cocoon, and your heart's pumping. Okay, I got to land on this thing, and whoa, now I'm out. I'm being pushed out of my seat. I'm chute opening. That's a shock to the system, and you're on that dark water, and now you got to think about your procedures. Inflate, raft, oxygen, coke fittings, and just go through that. So rote training is going to take over again. 30 seconds ago, you weren't thinking about any of this, and then you find yourself in that situation. In the water you go, and you're gonna pull on your raft over to you and try to get in it, and then get your survival radio out and put your strobe on your helmet and wait for rescue. And so again. Near the ship, near many ships, and there was the cruiser, and I imagine there's probably another surface combatant nearby. There's a helicopter airborne at all times. Even if it was near the carrier, it would be on top of you within minutes. So again, the good news is they were near the carrier, right?
Yes. The bad news is they were near the Gettysburg. So Keith Simon asked, how many seconds would the crew have to make their decision to eject? As we described, Ripper 1 is only 5 miles from Gettysburg. So this is a supersonic weapon. I'm not sure how long it takes to get to terminal velocity. This is a R-min, if not a break X type of shot, meaning be, inside of R-min. But let's just say a few. What would you say, Hozer? Less than 30 from plume until get out?
I would think
maybe less than that. 15 to 20 seconds, let's say, Keith, would be my guess. And then Ripper 2 had to decide. Again, he saw the cadence of his squadron mate get hit. He sees the second one, and now he's like smarter than just thinking, oh, I guess they're delousing us. There's drones behind us, I guess. Right. So right away, he's like, this is not cool. Goes into that missile counter move, down low, so forth and so on. And so, as we said earlier, props to the crew, Ripper 1 for getting out of the airplane and Ripper 2 for doing that avoidance maneuver. Because absent that, and if they had hesitated with ejecting, because again, what we're seeing anecdotally is the pilot in Ripper 2's like saying to his Wizzo, we got to go. He's not saying eject, because then at that point the Wizzo pulls the handle. But he's saying we've got to go, which I think kind of means you make the call, right? But I'm kind of feeling not cool right now. So we'll find out in the Jagman or whatever what the specifics were of that. But again, you don't have much time, at that point. It's guts ball. So here's another one. Jeff Test Pilot, who says, I have no idea what dirty means. So you're calling yourself Jeff Test Pilot and you have no idea what dirty means? I'm going to ask you to please change your screen name. Yes, it means gear and flaps down. Also, in a carrier-based airplane, that means the hook is down. So we do not believe, based on the range where the first plume went off, which is 15 miles of Ripper 1 from Truman, 20 miles from Ripper 2, that they were dirty yet. They were in comms with Marshall, had not been handed off to approach, but they're no longer in mission mode. They're now in land on the boat mode. And that's crucial, including the no minor detail that they didn't have their goggles on anymore. All right, let's look at a few more here, and then we'll call that a live stream.
Mooch,
well, let me say thank you to Lance here. Lance Ogden, we're the place where standard news agencies need to get their information. Appreciate that. We don't take it for granted. I think this is what is our utility in the media ecosystem, And so Hozer and I take our fiduciary responsibility to our former squadron mates and those we left behind, let's say, very seriously. And we're not going to hang them out. We're not going to trade on their, misfortune. But just like we did with the F-35C hitting the ramp of Vincent a couple of years ago, there's so much bad information out there right now that is a discredit to those at the tip of the spear at this moment, particularly those aboard Truman and CAG-1. And again, Hozer and I have a more than warm feeling in our hearts for that ship, that Airwing, because of our time spent. I am a CAG-1 alum. I was CAG-1 ops. I'm a puking dog alum, as Hozer is, being a former CAG-7 guy. He's waived CAG-7 back in those days, and then he waived CAG-1 back in April. So this isn't an abstract for us. So thank you for that, Lance. We take that responsibility very seriously, and we want to get it right. And again, I will say again, this is why we've differentiated official statements from stuff that we've heard unofficially. So, if we're wrong or we're misinformed, we will come back and tell you how.
Yeah, yes, you and I, we know people on that ship, and there's 7,000 people on that in that strike group that's out there right now, and they could be operating today. Tomorrow's Christmas Day. They absolutely could be operating, and the day after that, and they're going to be out there, and we have ships in Westpac and elsewhere, and they're going to be at sea on this holiday and then this holiday season. So yeah, we always think about them.
So this will be the last comment, and then we'll sign off here. Honorable Harbinger says, it's not complicated. AI controls our weapons. It saw the approach and attacked. Welcome to AI warfare. We have no idea that is in fact true. In fact, our feeling, having been there and done that and worked with Aegis, is that is not true. And AI is in the mix, but this definitely had humans in the go, no go chain.
Absolutely. There's the electronic wizardry that these human beings, have to master, and they do, but it's not perfect. It's a human endeavor, and under tremendous stress. And they've been in theater, again, ready on arrival within days, and they're put into this situation. So it'll be investigated. I'm sure we'll be back in the coming months to talk about it. I think people can be rest assured of that. No one wanted this to happen, and steps are being taken now to ensure that it doesn't.
And the other thing is, Truman's the only game in town, so it's not like you can just like fade away. They're on station, and so they got to sack up and just focus. This is no minor thing to get over. you don't want it to define the entire deployment. As we said at the outset, some aviators shot down drones for the first time in their careers, but that lives as an asterisk on this evening now. So, again, you don't want a dubious circumstance to define your deployment. I've been on a cruise like that. My second cruise, we lost 4 airplanes and 10 aviators on a peacetime med cruise. And so that always lives in infamy. And we did some amazing exercises but that always lives as a subtext behind the bad news. You want to sort of believe that they'll do other things that will eclipse this dubious circumstance. But right now, they have to get over it and focus on the job at hand. So when you're trolling online, just keep that in mind. These guys are out there. They're not in their basement. They're not on their couch, watching football. They're out there. So, we got to give them the respect due for that reality. So Hozer, once again, thanks for showing up on New Year's. I almost said it, on Christmas Eve. And all the best to you and yours. We look forward to seeing you in person at Moochapalooza, Pensacola in mid-February. So that'll be a great couple days that we get to see you in person. In the meantime, we'll look to have you back on when we get more information on this subject or anything else that's relevant.
Hey, Mooch, thanks for having me on, and Merry Christmas to you and your viewers.
Thank you very much. All right, so that will do it for this live stream. Again, Merry Christmas to everyone out there. Thank you. We had over 6,000 folks watching this live. As soon as I sign off, this becomes an episode on the channel, so you can come back and read your comments and add new comments as you normally do to a produced episode. So again, thank you for your support. We'll do a year in review episode on New Year's Eve. And we'll award the Moochies and the other stuff, and Mrs. Mooch will be here to moderate that. So that'll probably be our next live stream. We got some other stuff coming up on Syria. We're going to do a Syria update this week. A lot going on there that we talked about last week with our Syria episodes. So look forward to that. If you're not a subscriber, become one so you get heads up about things like this live stream. And we have passed 618,000 subscribers. We got a record number of subscribers this month, 30,000 this month alone. So thank you and welcome to all our new subscribers. And as I always say at the end, I look forward to talking to you guys again very soon.